We start with where Max alluded. The Eagles crushing the Steelers at home 34-3 to remain undefeated. Fly, Eagles, fly. That's exactly what Philly did yesterday. The rookie Carson Wentz was looking like a vet, throwing for over 300 yards and 2 TDs. The defense did their job as well, shutting down Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown after beating the winless Browns and Bears. Philly showed they can handle some tougher competition. But was yesterday, Stephen A., more about the bad Steelers or the good Eagles, in your opinion?
It was more about the bad Steelers, Max, Molly. Let me say this. I understand that I might be in the minority here. I've been a lifelong Steelers fan. First game I ever saw in my life, first football game I ever saw was the Immaculate Reception, 1972. I was 5 years old. Been a fan of the black and gold ever since. So much so, at one time in my life, I actually thought I was an Iowa fan because they had the same colors as the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's how bad it was. I say this to you to say this. I can recall Dan Marino blitzing Mark Malone at quarterback in the Steelers in an AFC Championship game. I can recall Tom Brady and the New England Patriots dropping 51 on the Steelers in the Mike Tomlin era. Yesterday at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia was the absolute most disgraceful performance I've ever seen by the Pittsburgh Steelers, to my memory. It was embarrassing. I was ashamed that I was a fan of this team. I could not have been more disgusted than I had ever been in my life. They got stomped. They got romped. They got their hearts snatched out of their chest. And to do it in this fashion, yes, we can bloviate about Carson Wentz, which I'm quite sure some people will do. But let me tell you something right now. The 73-yard hookup to Sproles, that shouldn't have happened. You have linebackers. The Steelers play a 3-4 defense. You have linebackers that did not touch Carson Wentz all day long. I mean, didn't touch him. He sat back, took pictures, called his mama, called his lady, called his boys, said, what's up to y'all, how y'all doing, while he was sitting there standing in the pocket throwing passes, okay? The Steelers had no pass rush from their defensive line. They were poor. No play from their linebackers. They were poor. Their secondary, which I have lamented on many occasions, was poor. Bottom line, that's how they look. Jarvis Jones and Boucher, Ryan Shazier both got hurt. Timmons got hurt himself, and I forgot who else. It doesn't really matter. And then, but even with all of that being said, Max, we look at the Pittsburgh Steelers and we say to ourselves, okay, the defense didn't step up. The defense was porous. We get all of that. But I expected my offense to do something, especially with Marcus Wheaton returning. Because now you've got a viable secondary option, Antonio Brown. So what does Marcus Wheaton do? Drops a touchdown pass in the first quarter. Drops 3 passes on the day, okay? All right, D'Angelo Williams, I'm not going to get on him. He's 33, going on 34 years of age, okay? Workload has been extensive. That's why he had at least 4 carries for 1 yard or less. You kind of knew it. This is why you're waiting for Le'Veon Bell to get back there next week. But in the end, there was no running game. There was no passing game to speak of. Fletcher Cox was getting the best of DeCastro. Gilbert had given up a sack for the first time, or only the second time in like 19 games. Overall, the offensive line was poor. The quarterback didn't respond to the challenge. The wide receivers didn't respond to the challenge because they were dropping passes. The defense was horrendous. And I ultimately have to look at my man, who's my favorite coach in the NFL. It would happen to be Mike Tomlin. I even have to look at him and say, damn, your personality, who you are and what you stand for this particular Sunday, that team didn't show up. I didn't recognize the Steelers. They were an absolute embarrassment as far as I'm concerned. They should have had to pay their own damn flights up. They should have had to drive down up the Pennsylvania Turnpike back to Pittsburgh. It was an atrocious performance, on just one afternoon. I'll be back in the saddle tomorrow, ready to root for them. But on this day, I sit here to you as very, very ashamed, more ashamed than the Pittsburgh Steelers that I have ever been in my life watching this team.
Much as it warms my heart that you are in this kind of pain over the Steelers, since we were arguing about them last week.
And they were #1 in my power rankings. Let's not forget that.
You didn't go to the game.
That's the best part about all of this. But this gives me no joy to say, because I'm a Giants fan, And the Eagles are always the thorn in the Giants' side. Even in years where they win the Super Bowl, you can count on the Eagles to maybe beat them twice that year. That was good Eagles. That was really good Eagles. Look, you can say, well, let's start with this. Point differential is really how you see how good a team is. A team is 3-0. But how are these teams 3-0? Are they getting lucky, or are they really outscoring their opponents? That's the underlying stuff. Not only do the Eagles have the best point differential in the NFL, the best by 29 points. That's a lot. It's almost 10 points a game. Better than not the average or the last team, then the number 2 team. But they're doing it by scoring the most points and giving up the fewest. Now, let me give you an example. Second most points scored by a team are the Chargers. Second fewest points allowed are the Seahawks. That's not the same team. Third most points scored are the Broncos. Third fewest points allowed are the Vikings. Not the same team. You go 1, 2, 3. The only name that shows up in both categories are the Eagles, and it shows up at number 1 in both categories. Now, you can say what you were saying, Stephen A., bad Steelers, based on this Eagles performance, when it's the Browns or the Bears, but not when it's the Steelers. There's a reason you and others were saying the Steelers are Super Bowl favorites, because they're really good. You could say that Mike Tomlin was outcoached. I think that's true. You could talk about their 3-4 defense. The Eagles flipped to a 4-3. And look at time of possession. Look at any kind of metric you want under Chip Kelly and see how that's flipped around under Doug Peterson, who did outcoach Mike Tomlin, whose quarterback outplayed Mike Tomlin's quarterback. Carson Wentz outplayed Ben Roethlisberger. Carson Wentz, people compare to Ben Roethlisberger. He looks to me like Andrew Luck with more discipline at this point. And is the offensive line blocking, protecting him well? Very well. That's going to change when Lane Johnson gets suspended, but somewhat. But the offensive line is playing well. This is a team without an obvious number 1 receiver, without a stud running back, and yet all phases of the game seem to be clicking for these guys. They're second best in turnover differential, by the way, have yet to turn the ball over.
That's incredible.
0 turnovers on the year. Only second best in differential because the Vikings have 9 and have only given up 1. The Eagles are 6-0. Any number you look at. Chip Kelly teams, dead last. Last 3 seasons, Eagles dead last in time of possession. Right now, they lead the league in time of possession by a lot, by almost 2 minutes a game. I hate to say it. It brings me no joy. In fact, it brings me pain. Stephen A., you may be happy about that. But this Eagles team looks like the real deal at this point. That was not only good Eagles, it was excellent Eagles. They waxed the Steelers.
Well, let me tell you why you're wrong. I don't care what team in the NFL you pick. I don't care how good they are. They're not 34-3 better than the Steelers. It was clearly bad Steelers because the Steelers didn't show up in any phase of the game. Now, I will give credit where credit is due. The Eagles' defense was ranked 28th last year with Chip Kelly. They are ranked number 1 right now, from 28 to number 1. But let's also understand why that dichotomy exists. You want to give major props to a Jim Schwartz, who's your defensive coordinator in Philadelphia, because as a head coach in Detroit, he led a lot to be desired. Some people joke that he was a glorified defensive coordinator masquerading as a head coach, which is what we all say about Rex Ryan.
Looks like it now.
Looks like it now because he looks like an elite defensive coordinator. He deserves props for that. Peterson deserves props for it. But let's understand why that is. It's basically by default because you have a coach in Chip Kelly who is non-conventional, unlike anything that the NFL has ever seen, much to the extreme detriment of a defense. So anything that you do that involves ball control is an upgrade, which is what the Eagles are engaging in. It doesn't explain all that happened with the Steelers across the board. No pressure from your defensive line. No, your tackles at the linebacker spot. You play a 3-4, and your leading tacklers had 4 tackles, okay? Your secondary was atrocious, okay? So you got no pressure. You got no coverage. The combination of the two left your linebackers in a hole, and even they couldn't produce for you. And then on the offensive side of the ball, when you upgraded by acquiring Marcus Wheaton back because he was injured, he comes back for you, and the first thing he does is drop a touchdown pass. I mean, come on. And so when you look at it,
34-10? I mean, like, what are we talking about? You know.
No. Because you know you're smarter than that. Don't try that with me. When you drop a touchdown pass early, it sets a tone. Because what happens is that you got to be a bit more guarded and a bit more cautious when the game is tight. But when you get a lead, you're sort of playing with house money, which is when the Eagles basically unleashed everybody.
It wasn't a tone,
and that's how you
that
gotta
was a
look at it.
symphony.
No, well, listen,
Stephen A., look, you're right about Chip Kelly. Sure, because, by the way, while this was going on, Chip Kelly's team was getting waxed again.
Yes,
so, I mean, okay, fine. That could explain why you're the worst run defense in the league last year. Does it explain why you were the second best run defense in the league so far this year? It's
fresh
one
legs,
thing.
Max.
Fresh legs. What, no one else got fresh legs?
Fresh legs. No. I'm saying the Eagles, because of Chip Kelly's atrociousness, his ineptitude as a coach.
Brings you to number 2 overall run defense?
He didn't give a damn. He didn't give a damn about the defense and threw him to the wolves. I'm not saying number 2. I get your point about that. I'm saying because he was so flagrantly negligent about the defensive side of the ball, you were going to drastically improve by virtue of being out there and getting some rest. Doug Peterson engaging in ball control, moving the chains, being very methodical in his approach, chewing up. Listen, there are times with the Sproles, with the Jordan Matthews and these other guys, where the Eagles could potentially score quicker, but they are focusing on doing things that supplement other parts of their team. And that's where you got to give them credit. Still and all, it don't make them 34-3 better than the Steelers.
What was special about the Steelers, at least heading into last season? I looked at that team, looked at the skills position players, but looked at that O-line. And when you have those skills positions behind an O-line like that, you're like, this could be the greatest offense ever, right? They haven't all been able to get on the field, but the O-line remains a strength. And the Eagles' defense, the now 4-3 defense, won the battle against the Steelers' vaunted O-line. They won that battle. That's impressive. Peterson, I mean, has surrounded Carson Wentz with everyone who on the team is a quarterback at one point. Every coordinator, every coach used to be a quarterback. He's surrounded Carson Wentz with people who get it. He's designed an offense that helps him. A lot of he can throw the ball down the field when he wants, but a lot of short passes, keep the chains moving, as you mentioned, ball control. He outcoached Tomlin. He outprepared Tomlin. Does the contrast with Chip Kelly highlight that? Yes, of course it does. But 3-0, waxing a lot of people's Super Bowl picks, waxing them yesterday by winning on the line of scrimmage against that O-line. You got to give it up to the Eagles. That's good Eagles.
I'm not trying to take any credit away from the Eagles. They deserve props. They deserve respect. Carson Wentz is incredibly impressive. He can read coverages, man. This is a special, special talent, which to me, at some point this week, we're going to have a discussion about who's worse, the Browns or the Rams, for passing up on Carson Wentz. But that's a different discussion. But I will tell you this.
You got to give Goff some time, too. He's not in this situation.
I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear
that. Field
exactly. You're not even on the active roster. That's about you. Might be about Fisher. Might be about the Rams. But it's also got to be a little bit about you. But I'm saying to you, I don't care how good the Eagles look. You ain't 34-3 better than the Steelers if the Steelers show up. The Steelers, they stole money yesterday. They did not show up. It was the most embarrassing performance that I can ever recall watching the Pittsburgh Steelers, just simply because it wasn't about a score, because there have been worse scores. They've given up over 50 and stuff like that. I'm talking about no fight. I'm talking about no heart. I'm talking about getting punked. I'm talking about all of that.
Well, we know that's not the Steelers.
Exactly.
So what does that mean?
I'm talking about.
Were they playing by themselves?
Right now. I'm talking about you didn't show up for this week.
Look, the Eagles.
It happened.
Let me tell you something.
You didn't show up for this week.
I don't think the Eagles are going to wear well this year. Not only is Carson Wentz a rookie, and they'll have time to try to figure him out, and all that, and may hit a wall at a certain point. Remember, very limited even in the preseason. But the Eagles are not a very deep team. They don't go really deep at all these positions. They're about to lose their right tackle. I think they're going to come down to earth. I don't see them as the long-term answer. However, through 3 games, they are putting it on the league, and that includes especially your Pittsburgh Steelers, Stephen A. Smith.
It includes my Steelers, but the first 2 games were against the Browns and the Browns.
Yeah, this was their first real
They just turned the Steelers into the Browns.
I got you. That's right. Or the Steelers showed up as the Browns or the Bears.
It's amazing how everyone turns into the Browns when they feast the Eagles. We'll see as time.
Listen, though, the Eagles head into the bye in very good position, 3-0, the only team in the division. We'll get into the whole division picture later. Ryan Clark will join that conversation. But meanwhile, you guys heard their thoughts on the Eagles' hot start to the season. Will the Birds win the NFC East? Go on Twitter, cast your vote. We'll share those results a little later in the show.